The Rise of Jumbotron quest is definitely one of my favorites. I have 93 lifetime wins, so I figured I'd try and do it alone. 4 months ago, I did the exact same thing in Golden Trophy, so I figured why not try it in Jumbotron too. Little did I know that it would be so much more difficult. In total, I actually failed 16 times, making it painfully close to the ending before finally getting shot many of those times. I had a ton of fun doing it though, and would totally suggest it to anyone that likes to play Jumbotron. But today, I'll be watching through some of my winning run and breaking down the techniques that helped me complete it along the way. So this is me on the first level. I decided not to glitch in a shotgun or a railgun just because I figured if I'm going to do it by myself, I might as well just do the first 2 levels legit. But anyway, the trick here is just to stay far enough back so you have enough time to react. Other than that, this stage is pretty simple and straightforward just because every enemy spawns directly in front of you, which means that it's rather difficult for them to catch you off guard, which is really the main reason that you can die in Jumbotron. I should also note that I will be skipping over some sections just because it's not particularly interesting, but just know that if you're skeptical or want to see this run in full detail, I will leave an unedited version of this clip in the video description. And so now I'm on stage 2. Now this hallway is actually a somewhat tricky part, just because several enemies will actually spawn behind you. So you'll see after I take these 2 guys out, there's actually 3 mouse droids, which are fairly easy as long as you're ready for them. But then directly after that, 3 more enemies will spawn in close succession. So you just have to be ready and use this corner. At least I use this corner quite a bit as a cover location, which is really crucial if you want to sort of survive for a long time. Obviously, when you have multiple players, it's a lot easier to be aggressive, whereas in single player, it's pretty disastrous, from my experience at least. So this next part is kind of similar to the first stage in that you just sort of have to stay back and make sure you can dodge bullets properly. So now I'm on the 3rd stage. This one is fairly straightforward if you know where all the enemies will spawn. So for this one, I've found that it's easiest to just go through with a shotgun, being moderately careful. Also be sure to pick up that railgun there, because it's going to be very useful later in this stage as well as later in the game as well. As the stages get more and more difficult, I tend toward using that railgun more and more. So the second part is this smaller room, and here I really never found like a foolproof strategy, but I've found that either using the shotgun and sort of running around like I'm doing now, as well as sort of hanging back in that hallway and sniping them with the railgun, they're both about equally effective. So for this last section, I found it easiest to hang back in this little entrance here. For a couple reasons. A, because it means you can sort of hang back and use the railgun to snipe off all the enemies. But secondly, and more importantly, there's actually a bunch of enemies that will spawn in this hallway that I'm standing in right now if I walk out into that room too far. And by just staying here, I prevent them from spawning, so I can deal with them separately after the fact. So once I take out this last stage here, you'll see these last 2. So, kind of tough, but you gotta get them around the corner there. But you'll see that that last stage spawns right behind me now that I'm out in this hall. And so by standing there the whole time, you actually prevent them from spawning and you can deal with them later, which, as you saw there, was fairly easy to do. So now we'll move on to my least favorite of all the stages. The first section, it's just a matter of taking out these large purple guys. They're really annoying, so I'm just going to skip over them, but the trick is just to sort of jump around them and just be faster than them because they're so slow. And so now I'm back on normal speed. Just going to show you how to sort of beat this part. So I find this stage difficult, for me at least, because it's so open. And so the enemies sort of come at you from a lot of different directions. But the best way I've found to combat that is to just find a corner and use it as cover. And now I am on to stage 5. So this is actually the stage that was the hardest for me and actually took close to the longest, with the one exception being the final boss fight. That took me probably too long. But the trick I found here is to stay in this little hallway and wait for them to spawn in and pick off each enemy sort of one by one with the railgun. So right now I'm just waiting for the spawns. It's rather slow because you have to wait and click a button yourself. You can see they spawn rather far away, and trying to do this with a shotgun would just be, in my opinion, really difficult. So once I finally wait for all those mobs to finally reach me, another stage will spawn. And this one's a little bit more tricky because it spawns in this corner here, so you sort of have to jump out momentarily, shoot, and then retreat back. Now there I'm jumping back because after I take out the mouse droids in front, they'll actually spawn right where you're standing. I died twice to that, and so it's worthwhile knowing and remembering that you need to back up right after you kill the first wave of mouse droids. And so after beating that wave, the next wave is sort of behind the ship from this perspective, so just shooting through it with the railgun, it makes it pretty easy. And then for this part, there's one more that spawns on that little platform, so I just jump up onto that floating platform to shoot it through the ship again. And then this is the last wave, but it's fairly similar to the previous one in that most of them spawn behind the ship, which I'm trying to find an angle to shoot at them without actually them being able to shoot me, but I ultimately fail and just decide to go run up and take them out through the ship instead of trying to find a way around it. You can see here they always get stuck on this little end, on this little pathway right there, so you kind of have to know that going in. I actually died once to that accidentally. And now on to yet another more difficult stage, stage 6. Now here I am just dreading starting because this one, well, one, it has really annoying noises, but two, it is, in my opinion, one of the most difficult ones, at least up to this point. So for this, it's pretty simple. Start, you just have to take out all the ground enemies first, otherwise they'll take you out from behind, which is not something that you want. Then this is arguably the most difficult part, for me at least, because all these guys spawn, but you have to get really close to them for them to do so, so you can't sort of take them out with the railgun, and so I use this post as cover, because otherwise, if you try running back, they have plenty of time to snipe you as you're doing so, so it just really doesn't work well. Now, I'm trying to be cautious here, but this stage, like before, really to activate all the spawns, you have to get super close to where they actually spawn, so trying to find those spawn points is a little bit difficult, but you can see there I found one that I was able to use the railgun with and snipe from afar. And note that I also focus on the ranged guys, or I guess they're all ranged, but the flying guys first, because their bullets are so much faster, and it's a lot harder to dodge them. Now for this part, this is where the stronger purple ground guys first spawn. I don't know what they're called. Someone in the comments let me know what they're called. But I decided that the best way to do that part was just to run and sort of be a coward and just run as far back as I can from them, because they are so hard to dodge when you're close to them. And so I just use this hallway as an extension of the battlefield, I guess, and use it to slowly pick off the purple guy. Now you can, if you saw that, I almost died there to the ranged guy still left over. But thankfully I saw just in time and was able to swerve. So that's that section. This part's a lot easier because these guys spawn long in advance. And you can use the explosives to take out most of the main wave that spawns shortly after. So you can see here I'm a little bit scared because I don't have a great view of them because of the overhang, but get the job done, and yeah, just use those explosives right away, especially if you're on single player. It just clears away a lot of the enemies that spawn right off the bat. And so you can just sort of pick off the ones that are left over. And that's exactly what I do here. Just trying to be careful, but ultimately do have to put yourself in danger a little bit under that overhang. And that's all there is to stage, what is it? That's stage 6 now. So we can move on to stage 7 after I take out a couple that I apparently missed before. Now, compared to the last stage, space, stage 7, for me at least, is very easy just because you can use the railgun to do almost everything. So this part, the hallway is so long and wide open with this narrow part that I'm standing in that it's very easy to just walk back and forth dodging bullets and just pick off each enemy one by one with the railgun from really extremely long distances. So you can barely even see some of them because they're in the fog so much, but that doesn't stop you from being able to shoot them just fine. As far as I know, this thing has essentially unlimited range. I've never ran into it, I guess. But you can see here I actually mess up a little bit and let them get close to me, so I'm sort of limited a little bit by how long I can stay out in the open, but nonetheless, I get it done just fine. It's honestly really easy to just use the railgun there. Now this part's probably the trickiest part of this stage, just because you have to spawn in a lot of difficult enemies all at once by getting close to them, but if you run away and sort of use the same tactic from before, just sniping them with the railgun, it makes it significantly easier. So that was the first wave. There's actually a second that will spawn here that's even more difficult, and you have to get really, really close to actually spawn it. So there, I spawned it, and I'm just running because there's so many that spawn in this one. And so I saved that barrel, or that explosive, for this moment, because if you do it properly, like I did, you can take out quite a few of them at once. I did miss this one purple guy, though, the elite enemy here, but I was able to pick him off by just sniping him through this little gap here. So this is a fairly easy part. You just have to trigger the spawns. I shoot that explosive there to take out the elite flying enemy, and then sort of back up into this room again, and just, once again, pick off enemies with the railgun. It's not necessarily the most exciting, but it's, from my experience, really the only way to consistently beat these levels. And so, after this stage, a bunch of these mouse droids will spawn behind you, which is really something to watch out for. They actually almost got me there. But at this point, you're able to run back into this area and take out this stage because they spawn behind you. And then from here, you really have to... Well, this part's boring. I'm going to skip past it. After beating the tank enemies, there's really one thing that you have to look out for, which is, and you can see here I'm delaying starting the stage because I want to escape. There's actually going to be enemies that spawn on both sides of this room. So by sort of luring that large tank enemy over to this spot, I am better prepared to take on this stage. You can see I mess up here because I don't stun lock some of the enemies, and so I'm not really able to stay in my position. So I retreat a little bit into this larger room and try and pick off each of the enemies, and that's the stage. So from there, we essentially just have to deal with this guy, but like I've mentioned before, they're really no problem as long as you just keep moving. So onwards to stage 8, which once again is the most difficult stage up to this point. Now, more than anything on this stage, I find it's difficult just because of how long it is and how many enemies spawn. So right here you can see a bunch of those flying guys spawn right next to me, and I just have to use this corner, and I get about one shot every time that I want to step out before they shoot at me. So that's how I beat this stage. It's more of the same for that. So once I finally beat it, I just activate the next, and this one is a lot easier, but note that I'm saving deliberately all of those explosives for later, because this stage compared to some of the later ones are, this one's a lot easier. But I did mess up here, and this elite enemy is fast approaching me, comes straight into this hallway. I jump so it shoots up, but still, that was way too close to death for comfort, and that was definitely one of the crucial points of error in this run that I made. I came very close to death several times on this level. But after I used a similar strategy on that stage, I reached really the second to last phase in this particular section. So just, you have to be careful of these asteroids, especially on this level. But then this is where a bunch of those elite enemies spawn, and I sort of wait to take out all of them with one blast of the explosives, which is really helpful. Otherwise, that is super difficult to do. And now, just when I thought I had finished the stage, and I'm just moving on, a bunch more spawned behind me. I should have remembered them, but I ultimately forgot. Wasn't too big of a deal though, because I heard them and was able to turn around before. But the stage isn't that difficult. The real danger is that it catches you off guard, like it did for me, and ends up taking you out. Now this is the hardest part of this stage, because you're once again trying to do it, or take all the enemies out when they're in such a wide area, and there's so many that spawn. Like, this is definitely the most that spawn in the whole game, with the exception of Jumbotron. And so, really, the best strategy and advice I can give on this one is to use the railgun and just jump out and shoot one shot every single time. It's slow, but it's really, since there's so many enemies and they all shoot at you, it's the only way to do it. Now, here it's nice to just be able to back up as well because of all the mouse droids, but ultimately they're not that difficult if you stay back, but eventually you actually do have to run in to take out the next stage. So I'll show you that when that happens, but for now it's more of the same. Just taking out the mouse droids long before they can reach you, because they're seriously frustrating. I died to them like 5 times. But just using this corner as sort of a choke point where you can either run out and shoot them with the railgun or shoot them with the shotgun. So this is the stage, or the part of the stage that you have to run out and activate these guys yourself. This is the hardest section. So right here, I'm very, very cautiously trying to activate them. You can see I just did. I'm literally jumping on the floor, just about died there. Those bullets went right over my head by like an inch. So now I'm just waiting at this corner. That was the hard part, is activating it. Now it's the easy part, just sort of waiting for them at this corner. But that's definitely the hardest part of, honestly, I think maybe the second hardest part of the whole run is being able to activate that stage without dying. It's really tricky and takes a bit of anticipation and a bit of luck as well. And now it's just a matter of cleaning up these really annoying giant tank enemies. Once again, really easy, just really annoying. Thankfully there's none on Jumbotron. Then I just take out that last wave by using that explosive there, using an explosive behind that guy to do some damage, or not. I think I missed there, but there's some more that I use here, and then just finish him off. And just like that, I found myself at Jumbotron, and this is actually the first time I had ever made it to Jumbotron. So I finished Jumbotron first try, and it's actually a lot easier than this level in my opinion, and I'll show you exactly why. So when you first spawn in, thankfully Jumbotron gives you his really nicely timed evil rant that gives you enough time to get to a position that will give you cover. And so in this case, I chose to go up on to the right on that ladder. I found that's the best position. So really, the strategy that makes this fight easy is to count the number of shots. So I decided to do 10 shots on each side, because really the end goal is to not have any other enemies spawn. So obviously when you kill one of the screens, a stage will spawn, another stage will spawn, and so on. And so what I'm doing here is I do an equal amount of damage on every single screen, so that at the end I can just go through and take out all the screens all at once. Now this didn't work out perfectly, as you'll see later, but I try and go along the path here so that Jumbotron never gets a good angle. This part's a little risky because I have to jump over that gap, but it ends up fine. So now I'm going to take my 10 shots at this screen here. And this is fairly straightforward. You once again have plenty of cover. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to jump over to that other platform on the right and use that to take out 10 shots on the last screen. And so here I'm just trying to use the rail as cover, and it worked fairly well. I have to do one more jump though, and that one's a little risky, but by triggering the bullets first and then running, it gives you a little bit of a cooldown delay. So here's my 10 shots on this screen. This screen is, like the others, fairly easy. There's enough cover to where Jumbotron really has no way of hitting you. So now that I've taken 10 shots on each, I'm actually going to go back to my first screens to figure out exactly how many shots left, Jumbotron, I have left on each screen. So that way I can time more or less perfectly exactly how many shots I need to take before waves will spawn, which is once again what I want to avoid. Because if you kill all the screens, all of the enemies will just die immediately if you've never seen that. So here I'm trying to time that by once again using a similar strategy of exploiting his cooldown. And so I'm counting here exactly how many it takes, trying to do an even amount of damage on both. And, at this point, I'm really scared that it's gonna, trigger a stage, and it did trigger a stage, so I was a little bit nervous that I wouldn't be able to take him out. You can see trying to take out those enemies, Jumbotron is able to get some shots off on me. And I'm going to leave this part in full just because this is really the biggest, most risky part, I guess. You can see that they all like to group up down on that pathway, and so what I'm doing is just sort of trying to reach my gun out over the edge so they can't see me, I can't see them, but I get lucky with, a shot that does some damage. And I'm able to actually take out the first wave that way, so that wasn't exactly the plan, but I realized that I'm not going to be able to run to the other side without taking out at least 2 screens, so I figure the second stage isn't actually that bad, I can probably take it. And this one was significantly trickier because so many elite enemies spawned. You can see there's just so many enemies that are starting to group up down there. And I'm afraid that that guy's actually going to be able to hit me from over there, so I ducked down really low. He had a couple of really close shots, but I was able to do a similar strategy, just a lot slower and a lot more timidly because there's so many more enemies there. And so, just very gradually, I'm able to take out that giant group. I wish you guys could see a better angle of it. It's a lot more simple and I guess a lot easier to see in VR than it is on a screen, but yeah, you can see I still have one enemy left. It's being annoying and trying to take me out over there, but thankfully I'm able to be low enough to where I don't have to be hit by him. And so there's a couple left that are really tricky to see, but you can hear them, and that's how I was really able to tell how many were left. And so now I've actually taken out 2 stages, and at this point, I basically know that I'm either going to win or going to get painfully close to winning. So I'm being very careful, because getting this close to winning and proceeding to lose would just be immensely painful. So I remember having counted off how many shots it would take to kill them, so I do 1 less than that on each, but I actually miscalculated and did 2 less than each. Obviously subtracting 1 is not a difficult math problem, unless you're trying to single player Jumbotron, then it becomes a little bit more difficult. But I miscount and I actually need to take 2 shots on both screens. But I don't know this at the time, so here I'm very excited because I know that I'm essentially going to win at this point because I've made the difficult jumps. I realize I miscounted. There, I take 2 shots and I take another 2 shots. Jumbotron dies and I have gotten the win. All the hero are victorious. Should not say heroes. But I immediately take a screenshot because this is really exciting for me. Still is really exciting, and I think it's moderately impressive because in full, this actually did take 35 minutes to do unedited. So, you know, I wanted to get a selfie as well. Thankfully, you can go back to results. This is not something I actually knew you could do until now. So, anyway, if you want to see the unedited footage, I'll leave that linked in the video description. I just wanted to edit out some of the boring parts, obviously, and I think I left most in. So, hopefully you enjoyed that. I'm really excited that I was able to do this, and I guess next I'll have to try Crimson Cauldron. That one should be tricky. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, especially if you made it to this point. This video took a ton of work to make and a lot of frustrating failures. But anyways, I'll see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.